Welcome to the Nurture Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Cagan, president of the DCA Virtual Business Support. At DCA, we believe in small businesses and the families they support. Learn more at dcavirtual.com. In 2006, Sean Askinosie left a successful career as a criminal defense lawyer to start a bean-to-bar chocolate factory and never looked back. His company, Askinosie Chocolate, was recently named by Forbes one of the 25 best small companies in America. So far, the company has provided over 1 million school lunches to malnourished children in Tanzania and the Philippines without any donations. Founded at the forefront of the American craft chocolate revolution and regarded by many as a vanguard in the industry, Sean was named by the Oprah magazine one of the 15 guys who are saving the world. He's received 2 honorary doctorates and given a popular TEDx. Sean's book, Meaningful Work, The Quest to Do Great Business, Find Your Calling, and Feed Your Soul, is co-written with his daughter, Lauren. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you had a very interesting bio, and as I was reading through it, I was like, hey, some of these things I'm not going to read in the bio because I actually want to ask you about them. Primarily, okay, so Trappist monk, and you founded a grief center. You've just done some incredible things. You clearly have a heart for service. Okay, I can see that just from your bio and the things your business is doing. But talk to me a little bit about belonging to a Trappist monastery.
Thank you for asking that as the first question. I love that. Thank you. First, I just want to make sure I clear things up for your audience that I am not a monk.
Okay.
I am not a monk. I have been connected to this Trappist monastery near my home in Springfield, Missouri, and the monastery is called Assumption Abbey. It's near Ava, Missouri, and they make fruitcake to support themselves. And I've been connected with them for over 20 years. I started going there on retreat. And then I'd say about 8 or 9 years ago, I took the step to become what's called a family brother. And so all that means is that it's a more formalized relationship, so that the abbot approved a rule of life that I wrote for myself. And one of the spiritual directors kind of helped me craft that rule of life, which is loosely based on the Rule of Benedict. And that Rule of Benedict is the document that governs most all Benedictine monasteries around the world and has for the last 1,500 years. And so it just means that when I'm there, I live with the monks in the cloistered part of the abbey, follow their prayer schedule, which starts at 3:15 in the morning. And they have 7 prayer services a day, and then they work. So it's the idea of work and prayer. And that is a balanced life that they lead. And it's a very important part of my life. And thank you for asking.
No problem. And I appreciate you clarifying that, because what I did see that it was family brother, but in my mind, I was like, oh my goodness, he belongs to a monastery. But that's very, very cool. So and the other piece that I saw in your bio talks about founding an organization called Lost and Found, which is a grief center. Can you tell me just a little bit about that?
Yes, I co-founded that 22 years ago with Dr. Karen Scott. We'd known each other for a long time. Before that, when I was a criminal defense lawyer, she'd been an expert witness for me in the area of grief, and she is an expert in adolescent grief. And all those years ago, as we were talking about my own grief experience, my father died when I was 14. He died of lung cancer, and he was a lawyer like me. And it was a very challenging experience, a very, really, really difficult time in my life while he was sick and going through chemotherapy and radiation and surgeries. And we didn't have hospice back then. And my mom really couldn't bring herself to give him pain shots. So I did it when I was 13. And anyway, so Karen Scott and I were talking about this, and she told me about a place in Portland called the Dougie Center. And she said, I wish you could have had a place like that to go when you were young. And I said, well, we need to start one of those in Springfield. And now 22 years later, and I'm still very active in it, as is Dr. Scott. We've served thousands of children and families in Southwest Missouri free of charge all these years. We serve a 22 county area. Kids and families come We have senior adult groups now. We have toddler groups. We have child loss groups. They come basically every other week and meet with other people who are experiencing a deep, sorrowful, heartbroken loss. And they essentially heal each other. And the job of facilitators is to really step out of the way. This is also a very important part of my life. And interestingly, connected to the first question you asked me about the monastery, I guess I can bridge that really quickly and say that my father, the weekend that he died, he had spent at Assumption Abbey, the monastery, and he came home and died after being on a retreat at that abbey with other men from the church. And so while I was trying to kind of come to terms with my own grief 25 years after his death, never really having done much to process it, I decided that I would visit the abbey where he'd spent his last night. And he had a very powerful experience the night before he died there that really didn't mean much to me as a 14-year-old. But later in life, it did mean a lot to me. And so that's the connection between the Grief Center and the abbey.
That is absolutely fascinating. And I can relate. My father passed away when I was 10, and I was in a very rural area of New York. And there were no groups like that. You just sucked it up, essentially. That's and right. When you, quote unquote, doing air quotes now for our listeners, when you suck it up, you're stuffing a whole bunch of stuff back that's going to show up later in your life.
Right. It's there. It never leaves you.
It does not. It does not. And some people, people, I think in general, until you experience grief, don't realize that it's truly not a linear process. It's not like, phase 1 is this, phase 2 is that. Those are phases, but phase 1 and 2 might happen 1, 2, 2, 1, back to 3, 4, back down to 1. It's all over the place.
Yes. And we teach children that, that there's no timeline for grief. And people will, as you say, sort of hopscotch around really. And that is completely natural and normal for people to do at their own pace, in their own journey, in their own way.
Incredible. Incredible. And you completely connected this back to your first career as a criminal defense lawyer. Because again, as I read through your bio, I was like, how are all these things connected? But they are. And that's incredible. So let's talk just a little bit about the criminal defense years. Tell me about what types of things you did.
I really built my reputation defending people accused of murder. And I had a really early experience with the courtroom because my dad was a lawyer, as I mentioned. And so I would go to court with him when I was really little, and I wanted to be like him and follow in his footsteps. And so after he died, I started to work in a law firm when I was in high school. So every day after school, when I could drive, I started working in a law firm. And then I couldn't get into law school right after college because my grades in LSAT were so low that no one would take me. And I mean, literally, I applied to 11 law schools. None of them took me. But I sort of thought that my resume would carry me into law school because I was really active in high school and college and extracurricular stuff and political activities and volunteer work. But it just didn't work that way. So I went to work just, in Dallas in the commercial real estate business, met my wife and retook the LSAT, went to the University of Missouri, and I graduated in the top 20% of the class and sort of proved them wrong that those standardized tests don't necessarily mean anything if you really work hard, which I did all 3 years in law school. And I went to work for a big Dallas firm right after, and I didn't really like it. I was kind of bored by that work, and I'd always wanted to do criminal work. And so I moved back home to Springfield, Missouri, and that was it. I started at a very young age defending people accused of very serious crimes. And I loved that work. I loved the courtroom, and I loved getting ready for it and preparing. It didn't feel like work. And those were really good years.
Wow. I bet you've seen some interesting things. We won't go into that. But you clearly made a huge change from that career of defending people who have been accused of a serious crime to making chocolate. So first of all, I have to tell you, I'm like a super chocolate fan. Okay. Don't know too many women who aren't, except for my daughter, but that's another story. So what made you think about a chocolate factory?
So the first thing was I really didn't have any hobbies, and I wanted to have some hobbies. And so I bought a big green egg, a grill, And then I bought another one because one wasn't enough. And I just started doing a lot of outdoor cooking and then baking inside, then making chocolate desserts. And from there, I started to wonder how chocolate was made. It was just sort of this path of exploration. And within a few months of coming up with this idea of making chocolate from scratch, not knowing what that even meant, I was in the Amazon. And I was learning how farmers influence the flavor of chocolate by how they harvest the cocoa beans, and how the beans are really is how the chocolate tastes. And so I came back from that experience. This is many years ago now. And I started to wind down my law practice, and I bought a building and started trying to acquire equipment around the world to make chocolate. And, I knew going into it, I would make significantly less money, and I did and have. I have never even come even remotely close to the amount of money I was making as a lawyer, but it's fine. I kind of knew that going in. I didn't know exactly what it would feel like, but it was fine. So here I am.
Okay. So kudos to you. Immersive experience. I want to learn how chocolate is made, and you go to the Amazon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I am so impressed with that. What you just described sounds super easy. And I have no doubt in my mind it was not. Tell me about some of the planning phases. Tell me about some of the hurdles you've had to jump through, particularly at the beginning.
Yes. The first hurdle, and this is, I think, one of the more, there are a lot of almost spiritual hurdles that we could talk to people about who are interested in leaving their career and perhaps jumping to another career or starting something. But, there are some real practical ones too. And for me, as a lawyer, I took 0 business classes in college. I took a tax class in law school. I could, maybe give you a legal opinion about your taxes, but I took 0 accounting. I didn't know how to do that. And so I needed to have a really big dose of humility about what I didn't know. As a young entrepreneur, that's not the easiest thing in the world because you're on fire with your idea. And so for me, I thought it was important to get help early on. Someone who could help me put a spreadsheet together and put, a P&L, a pro forma P&L together, and a business plan. And that's a very practical bit of advice, which is please try to understand your limitations and sort of backfill with friends, family, whomever that will kind of come alongside and help you plan this project. And that was the first big thing. And then I would say, we started, the first chocolate bar was sold in 2007. We were one of the first people in America to make bean to bar chocolate. Then, of course, the recession hit. And so the next obstacle was cash flow management. And I didn't know about that, but I put together an advisory board. I don't have to have a board. I was the single member LLC, no investors, but I did put together an advisory board to sort of help me and teach me cash flow management as I navigated my way through the recession. So those were some just practical things.
Okay. So I went through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. Okay. So I'm an alumni, and there was a lot of talk about advisory boards there. So I think this might be a good point to talk about what that looks like and maybe how you structured yours. Because me personally, if I were to, I'm an S Corp. So I don't specifically, I'm the only person on the board, okay? Which
Right.
works because of the
Yes.
size of my company.
And you have your board meetings in Hawaii. And yes, I understand.
Actually, I don't. I am very responsible with that. Though the thought has occurred, I just haven't.
You
I
have
might
your
take
board
myself out
meetings.
to dinner.
You have your board meetings when you're having tea with your granddaughter. How about that?
That would be phenomenal because Gloria is quite expressive.
Yes.
But so with the advisory board, let's talk first about the makeup of it. And then secondly, are these people that you pay? How often do you meet? Because again, being a business owner, sometimes it's hard to figure out where you can bounce ideas off. And, you have your leadership team, but they don't usually have the depth of knowledge that you have, especially when you're a startup in small business. So let's kind of dive into that advisory board.
I think the first, well, for me, I just did it the way that felt normal. I didn't do a whole lot of research on how to do it. I just did it, especially because the need was pretty immediate. When the recession, was upon us, we felt it. And so what I thought was important and what I did is I put together a group of 3 to 5 people, depending on when we're talking about this happened. But in the beginning, 3. And I tried to pick people who I knew, that were friends or acquaintances that were experts in their own field that brought something to the table that I needed that I didn't have. So, for example, maybe it was a marketing person that had really a depth of experience, not in the chocolate space, but just marketing, or maybe a food person. But the main thing was financial. And so I also tried to get people who were of different ages so that there would be, a sort of strata of experience coming to the table. We met monthly in the beginning. We didn't pay them, but we did give them a lot of chocolate. But not everybody who's listening is going to have a whole bunch of chocolate they can give people for free. But you have something, that you can give, and even if it's just your gratitude. But the people who are going to be on your advisory board, if you have to pay them, I think that's sort of almost defeating the purpose. I mean, these need to be folks that understand this is not long-term. You're not asking for a 5-year commitment, but they need to be connected to you in a way that they want to help and that they have time to help and that they share your vision for what it is that you're trying to do. And so what that means is before you even think about an advisory board, make sure that you know how to tell your story and that your story is something that you can tell in a minute or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. And when you call this friend and this acquaintance, don't just assume that because they're a family member or an acquaintance or whatever, that they're just, leaping to help you, or that they understand what it is that you're doing. And so I think it's important for people to have a sort of 1 to 3 minute, this is who I am. This is who we are. This is what I'm trying to do. This is why I need you. Can you help me? And I understand that you're busy. And if you can't, I get it. And there'll either be a connection or not. And you'll be able to tell right away if you have any measure of awareness. And that's how I tell people to start.
So then what type of topics would you bring to this advisory board?
Well, the sort of just cloud over all of it was cash flow and how to spend our money and when to spend the money. Should we let people go? I mean, it was terrible in the very beginning it would just so happen that I put all of my life savings into this thing. And, then here comes the recession. And so really the whole thing in the beginning was dominated by financial matters. And what one of the advisory board members did, in addition to meeting with us, is actually came to my workplace, sat down with me and another person, and just, cell by cell, built a cash flow management tool that we could use, taught us how to use it. And away we went. I still use a version of that tool to this day.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny you're bringing this up because we've been around for about 16 years and times are challenging right now. We have very high inflation. We have a really topsy-turvy market happening with demand and then softened demand and more demand.
And logistics.
You can imagine trying to get cocoa beans out of ports. I'm acquiring cocoa beans in the Philippines and Tanzania, in the Amazon and Ecuador. And I'm bringing containers in, from each one of those places once a year. Container costs have risen dramatically, even finding container space. And because I do all this directly, I don't buy from a broker. I buy directly from farmers. I help them open bank accounts. We open our books to farmers. We profit share with farmers, and it's all direct. And so we bear the risk and burden of these logistical supply chain challenges. And so the reason I'm bringing that up in the context of your question is because I'm actually thinking about forming another advisory board right now. And people would say, oh, but Sean, you're so experienced. You've done this for so long. You were one of Forbes 25 best business, you know it all. No, I don't know it all. And I am routinely humbled by what I don't know. And so we are at that place where I really feel like getting the advice of some outsiders, friends, acquaintances, again, would really be helpful to just sort of give us an observer's view of how we navigate our way through some of these challenges.
I think that is so important that, first of all, you're self-aware that, hey, the challenges I'm facing today aren't the same thing as when I started up or hit the recession in 2008. They're different now. We literally just went through a major world event for the last 2 years, and it's still lingering. And it has impacted all of those things. I've had other guests who have come on here who've told me about how their supply chain has been affected by container rates at ports. It's like, was something that was 15,000 is now 30,000. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's like huge.
Yes.
And the product that you sell, I suspect that each sale is modest. You're not selling $1,000 product, or $10,000 product. You're selling chocolate.
Yeah, it's a $10 chocolate bar, and you really hit the issue. I mean, last year when I brought a container out of the Philippines, it was $10,000. About 4 weeks ago, I paid $35,000 for that same container. And it's on its way right now to of course, it would, with my luck, be the Port of Long Beach, which is famous for its traffic jam right now. And we really need those beans. And so I'm watching, there's a little app, you can watch the ship go across the ocean and you can sort of track it. And I'm just waiting for it to get to the Port of Long Beach, which it's supposed to arrive in about 3 weeks. And we'll really, really watch it once it gets there. And it could make its way through fine, but we're preparing what if scenarios in case it gets stuck there for a few weeks or more. And
absolutely.
It's not good. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And then navigating just those logistic challenges and the price increase with what's happening in the labor market and inflation. I don't know if you're like me, but it's constantly in my mind, like I need to raise my people's rates. I need to pay them more. 8% inflation or whatever it is right now is really ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. We had our first price increase on the chocolate bars last summer. So we're coming up on a year. It was our first price increase in 12 years for most of our products. And it was a modest price increase. And of course, now we're getting hammered with, I had no idea that the shipping costs would rise. We're just trying to be careful. And so this that we're talking about right now is a perfect example of, I am not the financial soothsayer that can, so I need help with this. So this kind of thing that we're talking about right now is where an advisory board could really be helpful.
I definitely agree to that. I mean, I meet in a number of different entrepreneur groups where we share ideas and thoughts. And, I'm seeing some of the same challenges with people. And, I'm very fortunate. I have a service-based business. I don't have to worry about container costs, but there are certainly lots of things because my company is basically everything we do is related to, we have to be on the internet to do it. Essentially, we have to be connected to a program. So we've had increase in costs in our cybersecurity area just because people know that more people are working remotely. So there's plethora more of scams and phishing schemes and stuff to derail you or defraud you. So we've had some expenses change as well. So tell me about the chocolate. I love chocolate. Did I say I love chocolate?
Yeah. The chocolate, we're really known for, as I mentioned earlier, direct trade with farmers and acquiring these beans directly. And so with our chocolate, most of the farmers I have worked with for over a decade directly. So like the farmer in Ecuador, I first met him in 2005. I've been working with him that long.
Wow.
So we profit share, as I said. I'm going to Tanzania in about 10 days. It'll be my first origin trip in almost 3 years. And to meet with our farmer group there. It's a small cooperative of 60 farmers led by a woman. 2 of the 4 farmer groups that we work with are led by women. And it will be my 45th origin trip since I started the company. So I'll get back into the swing of things of visiting farmers. So hopefully I'll have them all visited by the end of the year. And I'm mentioning this because the relationships that we have with farmers is what you experience in the chocolate. And that is because who we are is inseparable from the product that we make, or in your case, the service that you deliver. There is no separation. So somebody down the street I could give them our recipe, I could give them our equipment and, tell them add these cocoa beans and put this sugar in. It wouldn't be the same chocolate bar. You mentioned at the outset of the show, well, maybe we'll talk about your philanthropy more than, well, there is no difference. We don't silo philanthropy in my company in one department and say all the other departments, you do your thing, and the philanthropy department, you do your thing. It's all mixed in together. So I think it was 2 days ago, I had a 2-hour meeting with one of our contacts in Tanzania about a preschool that we built and opened in January of 2020. We built it. but the farmers that we work with run it. They manage the school. I didn't mark off on my list, 2 hours of philanthropy today. It's just all mixed in together. And it's what I encourage other businesses, and especially really big businesses, stop doing that. It's messier, it's harder to manage, but let this service and mutuality and kinship that can be expressed in so-called philanthropy, let that be diffused throughout the entire organization. And so that's who we are, and when you taste our dark chocolate bar from Tanzania or from the Philippines or Ecuador or Amazon, you're experiencing that. And whether you read about us or not, one of the reasons I think that we're of such high quality is because we focus so intently on the quality of the chocolate. But at the same time, and I say this and I write about this in my book, it's not about the chocolate, it's about the chocolate. And what I mean by that is we're feeding children in Tanzania and the Philippines. We have community development work in Tanzania. We have an after-school program called Empowered Girls and Enlightened Boys. We've had probably over 8,000 young people graduate from that program since we started it 10 years ago. That's not about the chocolate. It has nothing to do with chocolate. It has to do with
but it kind of is about the chocolate.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
It's the relationship with those people that
even though
you're in partnership with.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it is about the chocolate and it isn't about the chocolate. And that's what I'm trying to say in a very non-dual way. It can be both. And that's what it is. And so that's a very long answer to your question about the chocolate, but
no, that's fantastic. Because I was going to ask about, the philanthropy and I love what you put out there. It's like, just make it a part of what you do. Yes. Don't make it a special thing. We've been working on an internship program that is part of what we want. We're still a pretty small company, so I wish I could build buildings and things, but that's probably not in the forecast anytime soon. But an internship is doable for us. And that's the thing. I think sometimes small business owners, think their philanthropy has to be huge, where it really doesn't. If you're making a difference to 1 or 2 high school, college age kids by doing internships and teaching them things, you are making a difference.
Yes. And not only are you making a difference, but you're giving an opportunity for yourself and your coworkers to themselves be transformed by the experience. And so often we have these preset notions of what our so-called roles will be, like I'm the teacher, you're the student, or I'm the healer and you're the healed. I'm the provider, you're the recipient. But really, if we're willing to let those roles be transformed and reversed, then we ourselves can be sort of almost kind of remade by the experience. And that's something I really encourage people to think about. And that is true with interns or preschools or nutrition programs. It's all the same.
Absolutely. So you've done a TEDx. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yes, I have. And it was a very challenging thing to do because the TEDx in Oklahoma City where I was asked to do this, they said, if you were going to give one speech, this is it. And only one talk, what would it be? And so this is it, and that was a lot of responsibility for myself to think, okay, if you're going to give one talk and it's going to be less than 20 minutes. So I worked on that for a long, long time and then memorized it. Memorizing things has become a little more challenging for me as I get older. And that was a real challenge. And I remember thinking at the time, I don't think I'll ever do this again because it was hard, and it was a great experience. I loved doing it. I poured myself into it. And there's a lot of emotion in my TEDx. So if people listen to it or see it, you'll see what I mean. And that takes a lot out of you. And so kind of like writing the book, that took 3 years. And I poured myself into this book. My daughter, Lauren, who works with me in the factory, co-wrote the book with me. And it was just a very deep and rich experience, but also a lot. So same thing with the TEDx. No one's asked me to do another one. I'm not sure what I'd say if they did ask to do another one. It's kind of like been there, done that. But I'm glad I did it because it really encapsulates in less than 20 minutes what I have to say.
Awesome. So we're going to make sure that, the link to your book, a link to your website, and a link to TEDx is in the show notes. How else can our listeners find you after the show, Sean?
The best way is just our website, askinosie.com. That's probably the best. We're on all the social channels. I have a blog that I write in very infrequently, but it's SeanAskinosie.com, and people can email me from there. They can find my email address on that blog, and I answer all those. So people are certainly able to do that, and I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Okay. Real quick, what's your favorite chocolate?
Right now, it's our Ecuador, and it just so happens that the crop of beans that we've received from Ecuador in the last year is the best crop that I've received in 16 years. I think this is the best chocolate that we've ever made, ever, from our Del Tombo Ecuador dark chocolate bar.
Okay. I'm going to check it out.
All right.
Sean, thank you so much. You've been a fantastic guest.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth, technology, and people strategies to help your business thrive. At DCA Virtual Business Support, our focus is making your business operations run smooth so you can focus on growth. Reach out to me at Denise@dcavirtual.com if you'd like to learn more.